got a call out of the blue from my assistant, who was in England. I was in Hollywood, saying that Tony Harvey wanted me to edit Land in Winter. It was with, as I thought, she said, with Audrey Hepburn and Peter O'Toole. Both names appealed greatly, and the subject matter appealed. I don't ever remember being sent a script. I got back to England. I left the film a little bit early, came over to start work, only to find that it was, to everybody's eternal gratitude, was Katherine Hepburn, and not Audrey, and O'Toole. And from then onwards, that's when things kind of took off. During the filming, I didn't have very much interplay with Peter. Katherine and I met several times and was always absolutely delightful. I was considerably in awe of her. But she was always tremendously encouraging, unbelievably enthusiastic. And she, of course, was the reason, I think, more than anybody else, or anything else, that resulted in Tony Harvey directing the film. She had seen a small film Tony had made called Dutchman, which he did on a budget of God knows what, say £5,000–10,000 at the time, and had been duly impressed. And she persuaded Tony that Tony Harvey would be a wonderful director for Land in Winter. So their influence was enormous. Tony obviously went on to direct. I was very lucky. I didn't really have that much experience, though I did have my couple of good films behind me at that time, and I was pretty young. But I was also taken on board, and the rest is history. I was in America and very sadly missed a rehearsal that was taken at the Haymarket Theatre for the entire cast. I believe my assistant, I checked recently, my assistant did actually go to it, which was wonderful for her, but I was just simply not available. I would love to have done that. It's rare to be given the chance to do something of that nature as an editor. You're usually taken on, really from the moment that the film starts shooting, is the normal, occasionally beforehand, and it's rare for a director or producer or anybody else to think in terms that it would be rather useful, helpful for a director to be present at a run-through. I mean, the run-through happened to be at the Haymarket Theatre. It might just as well have been in any rehearsal room anywhere, but the principal idea of attending one for an editor is wonderful. I did do that when I did a film called Chorus Line many years later, and it was incredibly helpful in understanding the mechanics, if you like, of what was happening and what was going to happen. Land in Winter had quite a big budget, but I really cannot recall, in fact I don't think I ever did know what the budget was on the film. From my point of view, it was certainly the biggest scale film that I had worked on to that date, and probably in proportionate time, and probably in proportion it would remain one of the bigger films, bearing in mind the change in the value of the pound over the years. But as such, it never affected the way I approached the film or anything else. And in a strange way, that never does happen in the cutting room. You just get on with the job in hand, and at a certain stage, you are told and learn what the budget was or is, and it may or may not affect how you approach it, but effectively, no, a job is a job, and you get on with it. Tony Harvey, the director, was a very distinguished editor, and all the things that was the most daunting on the film was the fact that he had such a tremendous reputation for very good reason. He'd edited for Stanley Kubrick and other very distinguished directors, and had started at a very, very early age. So the idea of editing for another editor was kind of intimidating. And I started very well with Tony. I remember I cut the first scene that I had edited and showed it to him, and he was absolutely over the moon. So I thought, wow, this is going to be wonderful, that we really hit it off. Well, unfortunately, the next sequence I showed to him a little bit later, and Tony was quite demonstrative in his feelings, and I sat next to him as he sort of virtually stamped his feet, and I could tell there was a certain amount of displeasure. So now, we never really went on to it, except he did say, which was another expression which I grew to fear for a short while, I know exactly how it should be. That's not a good thing to tell an editor. And the thing is that one editor is saying to another editor, I know how it should be, and you haven't done it right. But time passed. I continued on the film. I think I didn't show him very much material for a little while. And I think the next time I did, and he seemed to be quite happy, but I decided that I had to have a face-to-face confrontation, or discussion at least, with Tony. And we were in France on vacation. And I went to the set and I waited until Tony was between shots and I could have a little chat with him. And I said, Tony, you know, I don't think things are working. I'm thrilled when I show you a sequence, and you also are delighted. But it seems that if I cut anything which isn't as you had imagined it, it seems to be an unmitigated disaster. And so I said, Tony, if I'm going to be allowed, and you want me to continue to work on this film, you've got to allow me the freedom to express myself and try to give you ideas. And I can only say at this stage that if in the whole course of the film, and bearing in mind that you always say you know exactly how a scene should be edited, if there's just one idea I give you, then it's worth the whole time. And Tony took it on board, and in the sort of traditional happy, everybody lived happily ever after, we then established a wonderful relationship. It could not have been better. And from that moment, yes, we literally had a marvelous time. And Tony did allow me to express myself. And I would always say to Tony, if you didn't like something, you know exactly how it should be, so be my guest. Well, it never happened. He didn't. But he did, actually. He took one small sequence, which is when the King of France arrives to meet with Henry the first time. And there's just about 4 shots, I think, of the King of France treading through a whole mass of dogs and so forth. And Tony said, I know exactly how this should be cut. So he said, well, go on, take a cut, I'm going away. I do remember, and my assistant will bear out, that there was a massive film all over the place, on the floor, God knows where. He spent 2 days on it. He came back with just one cut, which is slightly different from mine, and which I always to this day maintain that he made me put in a very, very bad double action into the film, but that was between ourselves. And that was the last time he did it. No, we then had a marvelous time, marvelous relationship, and that continued through to another 2 films, I think it was. It would have been more, but things called me away. When one looks back on a film years later, I think, well, directors invariably say they can't bear to look at their films because they would have done everything in a different way. Whether it's actually true or not, I don't know. I look back on it now and think what I will say strongly is that the style of it suited the material, was faithful to it. I think it was well constructed and had a very fine dynamic, which is possibly the most important thing that an editor can control over a film. However well any individual scene may be edited, what matters in the end is that the whole piece is cohesive, has a dynamic, has a flow, and has the ups and downs, provided obviously that a script will allow it to a large extent, but times in a correct way to allow the big moments, exciting moments if you like, though excitement isn't particularly a word I suppose one would use about Lion and Winter, but allow them to simply come into the film and be there at the right moment. And I think the film achieves that, and I guess I'm quite proud of that. I still look in horror, however. There's a shot that concludes the first part where Henry is on the battlements and in total despair, and there's a pullback, leaving him, seeing him alone on the battlement. And at the end of that, there is a simply dreadful cut to a very, very high shot, one which, if one had used it, one would have maybe used to dissolve. I think, if memory serves, that was the moment that the intermission occurred. So I will make excuses and think that that was the reason that I did it. But I'm not proud of that one. But for the rest of it, I'm pretty happy.